Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Mason Arts at Home, Alumni Conversations, and Cocktails with the Dean. I'm Rick Davis, the Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts at George Mason University, and it is such a pleasure to have you with us tonight at the end of this beautiful spring-like day in the Mid-Atlantic region anyway, and I hope wherever you are, it's been or will be a good day. This series called Alumni Cocktails and Conversations with the Dean is a series of programs that we created as part of our Mason Arts at Home web content service. And we invented this thing very soon after the pandemic began, just about a year ago. We started producing Mason Arts at Home programs in early April of 2020. So we're coming up on our first anniversary as a way of staying in touch, as a way of reminding ourselves what we're about, as a way of continuing to fulfill our mission, which is that four-word elevator speech that I love so much: the arts create community. And now during the pandemic, our community, if anything, has grown. It's grown to be international, it's grown to be far-flung, and it's grown to be even more diverse and robust than it's ever been before. Tonight's program is an example of how our community is so rich in the kinds of experiences that the arts provide for students and professionals like the folks you're about to meet. We have tonight with us three distinguished painters who are alumni of the School of Art. And the thing that unites them, besides their skill in their art form, is that they came to their art studies later in life. Bobbee Cardillo was a real estate agent and was a vice president of relocation services for Coldwell Banker. She earned her bachelor's degree at the age of 61, and she is a painter, and you'll get to see a lot of her work coming up shortly here. Sharon Pound used to work for the State Department. She earned her BFA at that wonderful age, and again, we'll meet her and see some of her work here shortly. And Robabeh Riasati had earned her undergraduate and graduate degrees in engineering and urban planning, worked as a math teacher, and earned her BFA at, coincidentally, that same wonderful time of life. So we are so thrilled to have these three artists with us. Let's bring them into the studio and meet them and say, how are you all doing tonight?
Great.
Terrific. We are going to be able to spend some time with each of you individually, and then we're going to look at some of your work, and then we will bring you all back into the studio here, and we'll have a kind of a roundtable discussion while we take questions from the audience. So, audience members, I want to remind you or inform you, if this is your first visit with us, that you have a chat or comment feature on whatever platform you are watching us on, and if you put questions in that chat or comment feature, they will be relayed to us here in the studio. Well, here in my house. I mean, let's be honest, it's not a studio. And I will pass them along to our distinguished panelists. So without further ado, let's, Robabeh and Sharon, we'll see you in a few minutes. We'll spend a few minutes now with Bobbee Cardillo. Bobbee, come and join me.
Great, thanks. I'm delighted to be here.
So great to meet you and to get to know some of your work. Before we focus on your paintings, could you tell us a little bit briefly about your journey at George Mason and what brought you to study art with us?
Well, I did get a degree in psychology back in 1965 at the University of New Hampshire, and traveled with my husband and my family around the world for his career. And then came back here and started a real estate career. But I used to run around George Mason all the time. And I said to myself one day, I always wanted to do art. And so I applied and got in, and they took me as a transfer student. And all I had to do was take wonderful art courses and art history. And I just loved it.
You were telling us in the green room before we went on the air that you also have taken your art out en plein air, as we say, painting out
yes.
in nature. Tell us about that experience.
Well, actually, when I was in school getting the degree, I did an awful lot of figurative painting. But then my husband and I purchased a property in Maine on a little island at the end of a peninsula, surrounded by water and beautiful scenery. And so I started to paint landscapes, and I essentially invited Chowie Friend to come up and do a retreat with a bunch of other students from my class. And, we got to doing plein air painting together. I think Chowie had been away from it for many, many years himself. And it was a first for me. And I've continued to do some of it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can you tell us? I'm so interested in all of your work because it does have a figurative quality to it. It has a realistic quality, but it's not completely realistic. You're clearly making your own stylistic contributions. Can you just take a moment and tell us about the figure that's on my lower left, the lower left corner there, the woman with the hair
Hair.
flowing back? Yes.
Right. That was actually from a photograph that a friend of mine asked me to paint. It's of her mother, but I was fascinated by the hair and the opportunity to play with color and highlight the unusual positioning of the face and use it essentially as an object. And I don't know, just a little different.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely beautiful, and you're doing something interesting also with the painting immediately to her right there, the figure of the woman who's looking down. Tell us a little bit about that one.
That again was from a photograph. I shouldn't I shouldn't admit that. Joey always wanted us to paint from life, but this is a photograph of my daughter out west in a snowy season. I like the juxtaposition of the natural with the figurative, and I could concentrate on both of them.
Yeah, and I think, well, I'm not an art critic or an art historian, but there's something similar going on in those two paintings up above as well, because I can those are recognizable objects, I think, but there's also a real eye brought onto them. Can you walk us through just briefly the inspiration for each of those images?
Okay, well, the one on the right there is an abstraction of leaves, very close up of leaves. And I like very much nowadays to do impasto, to let the texture of the paint shine through. And so that doesn't have to be seen as leaves. And in fact,
Yeah.
Paula Crawford was my instructor, or was in the classroom when I was painting that, and encouraged me to look at it not as leaves. And that's really what I did.
Yeah.
The
Fantastic.
other one was intended as leaves because it's actually a 1-by-1 panel that is part of a 20-panel painting of my house in Maine. And that was the area of a tree coming through on the edge of the painting. So that's just one panel,
Wow.
but I have hung it separately, as I have some of the
And
others.
does that work usually exist as a complete set of panels, or does it you often break it
It
up?
has not, because I don't have a place to hang those 20 paintings together,
Wow,
but I would like
that's
to.
fantastic.
Actually, the interesting thing that I did in Maine is we had a little convenience store in the lower level of our old farmhouse. And I let it stay there for a couple of years. And then I decided, you know what, this would be a perfect gallery. So I tore out everything and painted everything, including the cement floor, and hung my
Uh,
paintings everywhere. And I did hang the 20 one by
oh,
ones of the house.
oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, in just about a minute or so, if can you reflect on your time as a student at George Mason a little bit? I'm just curious about what that dynamic was like coming back.
Well, I was a vice president of relocation services for Coldwell Banker, wearing a business suit all day when I started taking classes at night. And so I would show up at drawing one in my blue business suit and my high heels, and the kids would all be sitting around. And I got used to listening to what they had to say so that I could kind of keep up with what young people were thinking at that time. And I have very fond memories of some of the students who weren't necessarily going to go on in art, but who were in some other field, and just to see them develop as artists during the course of the semester was wonderful. And I also formed nice friendships with some of them, so that when I did get the house in Maine, and I was able to invite some of my young friends up to paint in plein air as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. I want to reflect maybe when we're in the group all together on that idea of the meaning of taking serious art classes when you're not necessarily intending to be an artist, like you were saying, some of those students, because I think there's some real value in that that is sometimes overlooked. So if I forget, remind me to bring that topic back up,
Okay.
because I'd like to hear what you and everybody else has to say about it. Bobbee, thank you for spending time with us here in the studio.
Sure.
Let's call it. And now we'll see you in a few minutes. We'll bring Sharon in, and we will hear from her and look at some of her work. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a real privilege to have you on this program. We're going to obviously spend a little time looking at your work here, but before we do, tell us about your journey that got you to us at George Mason.
Well, I actually started school in 1970 and didn't continue right away, and took classes for years. So I accumulated a lot of credits from 3 different colleges until we moved to the Northern Virginia area, and I decided that I would apply and try again to get a college degree in art. And the reason why it took me so long was because I had a family and my husband had a job where we moved all the time. And I lived in Africa for 6 years, and I lived in, I lived in Africa for 11 years, and I lived in Europe for 6 years. And anyway, it's been a long march for me to get my degree finally in 2011. Yeah.
Well, we are so happy to have been part of that, and the milestone part of it. I'd like to talk just again very quickly about some of this work. If we can zoom up to the top layer here, I'm so interested in the diversity of styles that you have given us here, and starting with the zebras, and then going over to the abstraction. I guess tell us about what leads you to paint in these really 3 different styles that you've given us here today.
Well, I just love making art, and I like to try different things all the time. The zebras, actually, I did that painting when I was in Chowie's class. And at the time I did 3 different, this is a very large painting. It's 48 by 24. And it's basically all of the zebra paintings I did. It was about lines and the texture. And one of the paintings I did of zebras, the zebra was blue and green. And the other one was a totally different, well, actually I did 4 of them. I painted over one of them because I didn't like it. But yes, right. I do that a lot. And if you ask me about the abstract, that's something I did recently. It's an oil. It's not a big painting, but sometimes I just loved to concentrate on interaction of colors and repeating patterns. And I don't know, it just kind of popped on when I was playing around one day. And so
oh, that's great. It pops right now. There's such energy and motion and light in it. It's really, really quite beautiful. And then you've given us 2 very realistic, in the sense of recognizable figures and images. And if I may risk an adjective, these are charming scenes.
Oh, thank you.
They have a,
thank you.
Yeah. So what's
Well,
the inspiration here?
the inspiration. Well, the snow day painting is a watercolor. I decided I wanted to experiment with watercolors. And I've had some very successful, they're kind of childlike, but the people like them. And in fact, I've done a few years where I've created watercolor Christmas cards and with my watercolor on the front of them. Anyway, but yeah, and I called it Snow, Let It Snow, and then somebody else said I should call it Snow Day because it's kids playing in the snow. So that's the story behind that one. And the one of the little girl at Tom's restaurant in Brooklyn, New York, is my granddaughter, one of my granddaughters. And when I was looking at her, we were sitting in the restaurant, and I was looking at her, and the pops, you can't quite see it in the painting, but the red popped out at me, and I thought, oh, I've got to scribble this down. And I took a picture of her, but I sort of did a little sketch of her sitting at the restaurant. And so, yeah, that one's very near and dear to my heart.
So what I'm so interested in, other than the lovely work, is the different kinds of inspiration that you take to find subjects for your work. I'm going to ask you about your artwork right now. What is it like making art right now, and are you actively exhibiting, and how does one do that at a time like this?
Well, I haven't exhibited. We moved to Williamsburg, Virginia about 3.5 years ago. And before, when I was in Northern Virginia, I was part of a league of artists, and we exhibited together, and I sold quite a few in that area. Well, when we moved here, I kept saying, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to get, there is a contemporary art center here. I haven't done it yet. Maybe once this pandemic is over, it's time for me to do that. But I just sold a 5 by 4 foot painting to a friend. They asked me what I was doing during the pandemic, and I started painting over a big canvas. It was another painting, I didn't like it. So I started painting over it, and I called it my therapy garden, because in the end, every time I feel like I didn't have anything to do, I'd go and paint another something onto that painting. But I showed it to a friend, and they said, I want that. So I didn't have to exhibit it or anything.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great use of pandemic time. Well, Sharon,
yes.
Thank you so much. We'll see you in a few minutes back here when we have the whole panel together. Let's meet Robabeh Riasati now.
Hi.
Robabeh, welcome to
Thank
Cocktails
you.
and
Thank
Conversations
you
with the Dean.
me.
So lovely to see you, and
to
to get to know your work, which is, again, like all of these artists tonight, very, very diverse in style and all so interesting. You have quite an interesting professional career that got you here. I only alluded to it in my introduction, but can you take a minute and tell us about a little bit about your journey in urban planning and teaching mathematics, two things that I admire but am scared of?
Of course. Northern Virginia been my home for past 32 years. But before that, in 1980, I got my degree in civil engineering. And then I got experience in that field in offshore technology in Houston, Texas. And after that, I went back to school and got my master's degree in urban and regional planning, and did some experience in that field. And one of my land use designs got adopted by the city of Huntsville, in fact. And then I started family, got married and started family, and decided to become a stay-home mom. And my children are very dear to me, and the most important aspects of my life was their success. One of them got his master degree in MBA. The other one got his JD, and he's practicing as a lawyer. And I'm very proud of them. But once they were done, I decided it's my turn to do what I love, and love, as they say, do what you love and love what you do. And during the time my kids were in school, I decided to do part-time jobs, because I had to put my degrees into some use, and I had enough mathematics courses in college to be able to teach mathematics in Northern Virginia area colleges, such as Strayer University or Trinity. But by the time they finished school, I started going to National Gallery of art classes. And all my life, I loved drawing, I loved painting, I loved making a sculpture, and be involved with all of these things. So I enjoyed my time in National Gallery of Art so much, I decided to do more. And I became a student at George Mason and started taking courses at George Mason. And I loved every minute of every course I took. And classes with Paula, with Chai, with Helen Frederick, with Lynn Constantine, with Ryan McCoy, with for history courses. I can name many of my professors that they contributed into my joy of being in their classroom. And with the students who were like, they're all much younger than me, but they were competitive, they were energetic, and doubled my energy. And I have one of the most satisfactory experiences in those classrooms.
It's just wonderful to hear you and your colleagues tonight naming professors that I know and respect and admire, both as teachers and as artists, and to know that they've had a positive influence on not only the many hundreds and thousands of young students that they teach, but on adults that should know better, and that really do get such
yes.
such joy. I love that phrase about the joy of being. Thank you so much for that. Let's take a look at your work, if we could. Just going across from left to right, you've given us 3 completely different pieces of art here, each accomplished in its own style. But let's start with the landscape painting, and just tell us a little bit about that.
That is a winter scene that I was just trying to show the reflection of different colors of nature in the snow. And the snow cannot be just white. And the time and the time of the day, how the light reflects without anything in particular, without any sun to create any shadow or any shiny part. And its oil is like 36 by 48 inch. And I just enjoyed painting it. I had some natural scenes from my past travels, and I also used some photos to do this one.
So this is kind of a combination of different sources of imagery
Exactly.
that
I
you've
did the
you
drawings
imagined the
first.
scene. Yes, very beautiful.
I
And I'm
created drawings.
particularly,
Yeah.
yeah, I particularly love the reflections in the stream, but that's a whole other thing. Um, let's zoom in on this beautiful piece of three-dimensional work here. This book with a tree growing out of it. Tell us about that.
The name of this work is Thrive, and is we make papers out of the trees, and this is a tree coming out of a book, a paper which is made out of paper, and it's the book was very small. I comparing with the size of that I have in this one is 36-inch from end to end, and I did every detail just to show a happy tree thriving from the middle of the book. And the fruit of the tree is spelled thrive on the ground. And also the word thrive is created across the book.
Yes, it's absolutely so beautiful, and I actually thank you for mentioning thrive, because now I see that coming across the landscape of this book, which is really
thank you.
So many layers of meaning there, just absolutely beautiful. And now this lovely piece, which I can't even describe what it is, so why don't you tell me about it?
This is a collage. I actually wanted to give an idea of different type of artwork that I've been doing. This one is maybe the beginning of going abstract. I don't. I did a lot more abstract work that is not here, but and I created a new style for myself. But this is the beginning of it, and I wanted to show diversity, and this is 48-inch by 48-inch, and I used National Geography magazine papers, and I used orange oil on it to mix up the colors of the pictures in that magazine, and I used my fingers to create certain things on it with the paint. This actually was displayed at one of the jury shows again, and it got sold.
Well, that's fantastic. I can easily see why. This is one of those pieces that, like all good art, I think repays long viewing. I've now seen this piece a couple of different times in our rehearsal, and a couple of times tonight. And every time I look at it, I see more. And I think it's one of those pieces that is, certainly inexhaustible in the details. If you have the whole field, and then you can zoom in on each square and really get something out of it. It's really quite remarkable. Let me ask you one question about your experience at George Mason, and then we'll bring all of you in back together and talk about some larger questions. But you were mentioning your professors and how much you appreciated them. Just sort of the same question I asked Bobbee. I'm just curious, what was it like, just as a very accomplished professional older student coming into this energetic group of young folks, and what was the dynamic between you?
Honestly, I was at home.
Oh, that's great.
It was wonderful. It's the young people at George Mason were a lot more than I expected. They're wonderful artists, and their work is praisable. and I can see why. And I have to say that their attitude, their politeness, and their it was not what I expected to see from the younger generation, because I did work as volunteer for 12 years in Fairfax County schools, and even though 90% are wonderful, but you do hear and see things that it was much different at George Mason.
Well, you're making me a very proud dean, I must say, and certainly my experience of George Mason students is similar to yours. Well, we have a lot more to talk about, and we have questions to get to, but I'd like to bring everybody back into our virtual studio now. So we'll bring Bobbee and Sharon back in. Hello, have you been enjoying the program?
Good. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, you're quite a panel. I want to pick up the question that Bobbee and I sort of left dangling at the end of her solo segment, which is this idea of the value of an education in the arts, especially studio art, visual art, which you're all accomplished at. But just even if you can think more generally about how, as you've both practiced it and observed it, and as you compare it with your long professional lives, each of you have had very accomplished professional lives. How would you relate the value of training or an education practice in the arts to those different career paths that people follow? And I don't have an order for answer here, so anybody just jump in.
I'll just say that my experience when I started out, especially in the lower level classes, where there were a lot of students who were just taking the course to, get credit for us, to check off a box, they discovered things about themselves that they hadn't really appreciated. And many of them discovered that they were wonderful draftsmen and that people would appreciate their work. And it gave them a dimension that even if they have a career in real estate for their whole lives, at some point they may decide to go back and explore the creative side that they know is there. So I hope that will happen for some of the wonderful classmates I had.
Oh, that's great. And I'm sure you were a model for them as well, a role model, showing up in full battle gear from your job and saying, I'm gonna make art tonight. Yeah, that's fantastic. Anybody else have a thought about that? Perhaps not. That's what we'll come back to it if you think something. Meanwhile, another question has come in off of our chat line, and that is, what advice would you give to adults considering getting a degree at midlife who might be a little hesitant to be the oldest person in the classroom or studio? That's a very interesting question, and I would love to know your answers.
I can answer that one. I do believe in what I said. Do what you love and love what you do. And if at this time of our lives, I feel like we should not think about our age or our status in life. We should think about what we can accomplish and how we can reach our goals. I would never be sorry about what my decision was, and I will always I'm happy about what I did, because I feel a lot more energy. The energy that from the kids in the classroom increased my energy, and I am participating in different leagues and art shows, and I think I'm just going to increase my activity in art, and as I planned. So I think it's never too late, and it's always a wonderful thing to do what you want.
Sharon.
I was actually, I mean, I love being with other artists. First of all, that was just amazing. You just sort of feed off of each other with ideas. But I was shocked when I first went back. I wasn't the only old student. I was,
That's right.
I mean, the university is so culturally diverse, and many students were trying to work and come to school, and and I loved, like, being around young people, but especially creative people in general. That it didn't faze me at all. I mean, Bobbee and I were in classes together, and yeah, we had quite a few people in classes that were my age, or not necessarily just right out of high school. So don't worry about that. Just do it. Just go in.
Exactly.
Good advice.
And especially,
Bobbee?
I think if they want to get into art, I think the creative process is an equalizer. I think people kind of forget about your age when you're comparing your painting with theirs and getting ideas from them, getting inspiration. I had so much inspiration from 20-year-olds. I have attempted to follow some of their careers since they left George Mason because they just inspired me so much while I was there. But I think we all felt like equals in the creative process.
That's so wonderful to hear. And as I've not, of course, as the dean, I also teach at Mason, and primarily in the School of Theater, but also in the Arts Management program. And in both of those settings, I've had a number of students who are in other non-traditional age brackets and other brackets. And that is, as you've pointed out, a characteristic of George Mason that really makes it an exciting place to study and to teach and to work. And the other thing, and I just have to brag on the university a little bit because I think your presence here invites me to do that. The students are by and large a very serious lot. We certainly have college students. We're a college, we're a university, and we have youthful exuberance, aplenty. But by and large, students who come to Mason are doing it for reasons that are quite serious, quite highly motivated, and it shows in the behavior of our students in moments of triumph and in moments of difficulty. We have a very, very strong campus ethos of trying to do the right thing for each other, and that's really been terrific. There's something else that's interesting that I want to signal here, and that is that during the pandemic, we have had amazing growth in the School of Art itself, which I want to hear your thought about that. The School of Art is one of the fastest growing programs. It's the fastest growing program in our college, and we've had some struggles in some other areas because it's very hard to do some of our performance things live, fully during the pandemic. It's hard to do a lot of things at a university, lab sciences and things like that. But the studio art program has really taken on a real energy during this time. And I just wonder, as artists and as people who are continuing to work through this pandemic, what is your feeling about being an artist during this anomalous time in our history? Has it affected your work? Has it affected?
I am absolutely grateful that I have something. I have it. I can come up to my studio and I can just work away and create something. And yes, I feel kind of just so grateful that I have that. And this whole year has been difficult in some ways, but I could always kind of come up and hide away and make art.
Terrific. Anybody else? Robabeh?
Yes, I think this is a time that is tough on many artists, but participating in art galleries and art leagues, and using the art online, and it's like a medicine for our soul because it really keeps us busy, and also it calms and it's relaxing, and I also feel like we are giving to the society in some ways by sharing our artwork, and I particularly enjoy. In fact, I'm gonna have during this, by the end of the summer, I'm gonna have a solo show at Torpedo Factory Art Gallery.
Oh, that's fantastic! Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's great.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Oh, and I hope by then it's wide open and everybody can come. Right?
Thank
That's
you.
what we're thinking. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I can see why
please.
I was just going to say, I can see why the School of Art would grow during the pandemic, because making art really is a personal kind of private experience. If you do studio with students around you, you do get their advice, but sometimes you zone out. You're just in your own space, in your own head as you're making the work. So as long as you have the chance to have a online video relationship for critique purposes, then I think it's a perfect kind of field to be growing during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And that sure is true. And I also have to say, in praise of our studio art faculty and leadership, the pivot, which is a very overworked word these days, but it's the only one that is best for the purpose, to the full online digital teaching environment was very well accomplished in the School of Art, and the classes that have made the transition over to online have been very successful. And of course, nowadays there's a lot of art that is created natively in digital form, so you're already in a room at a computer, so there's a nice transition there. So those are wise words. Thank you. One of our audience members wanted to hear just a little bit more about a question that we addressed a little bit earlier, but I think we can unpack it slightly more, and that is that idea of including art in your education, even if you don't intend to be a professional at it or fully practice it, and that relationship that it might have to other kinds of activity. That's a rich and resonant theme, and one of our audience members wants us to spend a little more time on it. Anybody have? Robabeh, I saw you starting to generate an idea there, so I'm going to call on you like a teacher.
I had something in mind regarding that, but I am not sure if I am right at the point. What I can say is it's a great experience, enough for me to keep taking courses at George Mason, and I am taking courses online right now, and expanding my knowledge in art in different parts that I did not experience as a student in George Mason, as a full-time student in George Mason. Right now I'm a student also at George Mason, because I will keep taking courses and keep learning.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I also think that, particularly if you come from a very business-oriented or very precise kind of discipline, doing art opens your mind to whole new ways of thinking about things and seeing things. And when you see your fellow classmates' work, it may prompt something in you and open something up you didn't even know was there. So I think it helps you grow. And it may help you with dealing with emotions you're having or feelings that you're not able to deal with in your other career work.
That's great. Those are. Go ahead, please. Yeah, Sharon.
I could also add that having I had opportunities in my job where being able to create something artistic for example, a slideshow or a brochure to hand out for an event. That came in handy. It would come to me, people would come to me and say, could you, I worked at the Foreign Service Institute, and at one point I created this online protocol class that if people didn't have time to, not online, but it was back in the day when you had CDs, but just using your creativity sometimes comes in handy where you least expect it. And if you have an interest in art, why not take it? You never know when you're going to use it for other reasons.
I absolutely love that answer because one of the things that we talk about in CVPA generally is the unpredictability of life and career, and bringing in insights from all points of the compass to help you in whatever work you're doing. And I think you all have just illustrated that really beautifully. Another question has come in, and it's actually kind of related to that last point. Did your interest and practice in art come about when you were adults or earlier in life? Was it an early impulse that was put aside and reclaimed, or did it spring up later? Anybody want to tackle that?
For me, it was an early
Bobbee first
impulse.
Because she spoke, and then Bobbee, and then Robabeh.
Okay. For me, it was an early impulse that I definitely put aside when I went to college. I painted and drew through high school, but I never saw myself as good enough to be an artist. To me, the word artist was somebody who hung on the walls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I didn't think I was ever going to be in that category, so I put it aside, but I always wanted to go back. And it took me 40 years, I guess, and I finally did.
Wow. That's fantastic. Robabeh?
For me also, as far as I remember, I loved drawing and painting. So it was an early drive to art.
And I've always thought, and please correct me if I'm wrong or wrong in your case, but I've always thought that engineers and artists had a lot in common in the sense of spatial, description of space and drafting and articulation of line and shape and all that. I mean, to me, and I'll confess, the origin of that idea is that I spent many, many years as a stage designer before I became a director. And I actually, and this is true confessions in front of the three of you and all of the artists in the audience, I left stage design quite seriously. I loved it, but I left stage design because I wasn't a good enough painter. I figured I didn't have enough fine art skill to make it possible for me to be a great stage designer. And I wish, looking back, I wish I had taken a whole bunch more drawing and painting and 2 and 3D design classes to complement my theater design work. But it seems to me that idea of building stuff and making stuff, is art.
I agree. It definitely has its relation to art, land use design, or even offshore technology. Without having some kind of artistic view, it's not as easy.
Right.
I thought I heard another voice piping in there.
I was just going to add, I always loved art, but I really think Mason was a turning point for me, because I knew I loved art. I could make fairly good stuff, but I learned how to do it better. So, I mean, that's all I got to say.
I have a question now that's partly based on something that's come in online and partly my own interpretation of it, and that is in the arts of any kind, whether it's rehearsal in a play or an opera or a music performance, or whether it's a critique in an art studio, there's this idea of sort of critical thinking that is reflected in the feedback that the director or the teacher or the mentor gives to the performer or the student, and then the work changes and goes through another iteration, and there's this cycle of feedback and growth. And to me, that's a very interesting model for critical thinking generally, which is one of the skills that universities and colleges really want to be able to teach. And so I'm wondering if thinking back either on your art work and or on your other professional life, that idea of critical thinking as we practice it in the arts, does that resonate at all with the work that you either are doing or have done in other fields? The feedback loop that we practice, or is it completely different?
I think the critiques you get from other people are definitely very valuable. They see things that you haven't noticed. They point out a reference to another artist or another creative person that you didn't know existed. And so they lead you to either do more research or to perhaps go in a new direction because they see something that you didn't see. I think the critiques are really very valuable in art, and I suppose in other fields as well.
I have to say that art is a lot more complicated than it seems. And critical thinking, of course, without it, you cannot create. Creation and critical thinking are hand to hand. And yes, of course. And as I mentioned, I graduated in 1980, first time in my life. And back then, I was competing with my brothers who were all in engineering fields. Otherwise, I would go for art. And I did not realize how much brain work is required for art until I was at the school.
That's great. Wonderful answers. Well, we're almost out of time in our show, but I want to give each of you the chance to offer any kind of final reflection or thought or comment about the next steps of your own artwork, or something about our conversation tonight. But I don't want to leave the stage without giving each of you a final say. So let's go in the order that we started in, and start with you, Bobbee.
Well, I'm so grateful that I had a chance to go back to school and study art, and that I chose George Mason to do that. I met great professors, and some of whom are still my friends, and I still am in contact, in particular with Chowie. And I think I don't know, I just learned so much from all the other students there and it gave my life a new direction at a time when, it was not the midlife crisis. It was a little later than that, but it was the late life crisis where I got to do something new in the last chapter. So I'm very
Oh,
grateful.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Very well said. Sharon?
It is not, if you're still working, it is hard to do both, but it is so worth it. If you want to study art first, and if you want to get a degree, which was my long-term goal for most of my life, do it. I mean,
Yeah.
just
Oh,
do it.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Inspirational.
Thank you so much.
And Robabeh.
I have to say, I cherish every moment that I spend with the younger generation at George Mason. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of my experience tonight.
Oh,
Thank you
well,
so much.
thank you. And now it's time for our ceremonial toast. Because this is, after all, alumni cocktails and conversations with the dean. And I'm
Right.
sorry to say that this is sparkling water, but
Yeah.
it'll do for the occasion. But I am raising a glass to you three because you have not only created beautiful images that have added something of real value to our world, but you've shared your lives and stories with us in a way that is truly inspiring to people of all generations, to students who are just starting out, and to people who might be thinking about finishing up at a later point. So this has truly been an exceptional experience,
Thank you.
and here's to you. Cheers.
And here's to art.
Thank you. Cheers.
Here's to art. Thanks very, very much. And I hope to stay in touch with each of you and see your work as it continues to develop. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thanks
us.
so much. Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, all.